So today we're going to be getting real and raw about what it's like to go brand side and also what it's like to grow up as a creative leader. And I was really excited about this panel because I love anything that's raw and real, obviously. I'm at Fishbowl. But I know there's people from Google in the audience who are like, don't fuck this up. So we'll try. So I'd like to introduce to you Xanthe Wells and Jason Luster to the stage. They're both amazing creative leaders at Google. And they have a ton of accomplishments, so I'm just going to read their bio so that you know where they're coming from. Xanthe Wells is a senior director and global ECD for Google Devices and Services, who oversees an international creative team of 150 plus creatives. Wow, I'm like 5 is too much for me. Xanthe was named an Ad Age Woman to Watch in 2019, one of Business Insider's 30 most creative women in advertising, and Ad Age's 40 Under 40 in 2015. She's received tons of awards by Cannes Lions, One Show, Andes, and FWAs. Xanthe was also previously ECD at TBWA Media Arts Lab and was partner and CCO of a boutique agency called Pitch, which, through her leadership, led it to become one of Ad Age's agency to watch A-list. And another key accomplishment, Xanthe has judged an award show while breastfeeding in front of all these dudes. She has an amazing picture if you can follow her on Instagram. Jason Luster is a creative leader at Google Cloud with more than 20 years of experience across digital marketing and traditional advertising. After a career at award-winning agencies in design focused on entertainment and automotive, Jason later became Global Group Creative Director for eBay's in-house agency, which ranked number 11 on Ad Age's top 100 digital agencies list. He then took on the role of ECD at Salesforce, leading a team of 100 creatives across advertising, film, digital, events, and branding, and helped establish a full-service agency within Salesforce and drive the fastest-growing software company in the world from $4 billion to $10 billion in revenue. We need to talk. Now with Google Cloud, Jason is leading creative and building an internal team focused on branding and global advertising for Google's fastest growing business. Let's give them a round of applause. So just a little bit about the format. People often say that the best part of panels is the Q&As, because that's when shit really gets real. So we want to leave some space for you guys to ask questions. And we're going to start with 10 minutes around transitioning from agency to brand side, and then move on to creative leadership, and finally leave you 10, 15 minutes for questions. Cool? Awesome. All right. So quick show of hands. Who's considering joining a brand? Awesome. Well, we actually did a study on Fishbowl, and 60% of people on the agency side are thinking of going brand side. And it's really interesting because back in the day, it was really not cool to go brand side. It was like, oh, you're a sellout. But now we join brands to have impact and do things that are real and come out in real life. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you both didn't expect when you joined brand side.
Yeah. I actually love how Kat opens each 3% talking about her age. I think that's really refreshing and wonderful. And actually, I was thinking about it a lot. And I was 38 when I went to client side, to Nest, and then to Google. And I was looking around, and I remember thinking, I'm going to get aged out of this industry. Like, I mean, just totally being real. Like, I don't see any old people. And I remember my first day of orientation at Google, there were a bunch of 50-year-olds in the room. And I was like, wow. There's people that are celebrated because they have experience and knowledge, and they can keep, making an impact. So that was really huge. Another thing that I didn't expect at all, I guess, is just work-life balance. I mean, that's talked about, but I remember one of my first weeks at Nest, I got my snacks ready, and it was 6 p.m., and I was buckling down for the night, and everyone was clearing out. I'm like, where did everyone go? Like, isn't this where you work now from 6 to 10? Like, I didn't understand that. So one of the few things. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it moved from being a sprinter to a marathon runner, right? In agency world, I felt like we were always running 100 miles an hour. I think that's almost part of what's so attractive to it. Trying to get everything done and being in the middle of wonderful projects. I think, moving over, I tell my team all the time, moving over in brand side, it's much of a marathon. You have to have the long-term goal, and you have to think about what's really out in front of you, because you're now the stewards of that brand. It's not like you're going from project to project to project like you do inside of an agency. And so that was the biggest thing for me, is shifting gears into a much different mode and trying to get myself to understand that, like, tomorrow, some of those same problems, some of the same challenges are going to be there, and we'll have to tackle those on.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear these differences. I think one of the other differences is how do you create great work on the brand side? Because I've joined brand side also. I was agency side for 14 years, and I've been there for 6 months at Fishbowl. And what I noticed is the consensus, like trying to win everyone over, versus before it was like, you have a CCO, if they like it, it's cool. If people don't like it, shut up. Whereas brand side, it's like 10 people need to agree. And so I'd love to hear how you actually sell great creative work. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, 40.
Yeah, 50.
Yeah, how do you sell good creative work?
Well, it's a good question. It's something I'm still trying to figure out. Like, we're pushing it each time. But I think, one of the most interesting parts, actually, I remember agency side going, why can't we ever get the CMO on the phone? Why can't we get the brand manager on the phone? What are they fucking doing besides the campaigns? Like, we got to get them on the phone. And being on this side, I'm so surprised how incredibly busy they are not thinking about campaigns. Campaigns are the 20% maybe of their lives. It's moving the business, running promos, doing business changes so that we ensure product development is right. And so it's been really fascinating to see the sliver of time that these great people have to actually think about the work. And so I get, a fractionally larger amount to think about the work. And so I can help, because I'm sitting on the same side of the table now, I'm able to kind of push it when needed, and also have those sidebar conversations that just couldn't happen on the agency side, where you'd be emailing someone, your only contact, and it had to be at a certain level to go up the chain. And here you get the latitude of all the different layers and levels that you can approach as a friend. And it's more, I think there's a little bit more trust because you're on the same team. They see me as someone that's building the brand with them, not trying to sell. And I think that dichotomy is really different, and also something that I love, because I feel like I'm part of one team instead of sometimes adversarial teams where, there's this feeling that, like, if you're on the agency side, you're always pushing great work, but I feel like you can even push harder because you can also do the heavy lifting stuff that they need done, right? I got to do retail. I got to put posters up in stores. I got to do fixtures, but I also, get to sell TV campaigns and make all that kind of work. But we got to make the business run, right? And we have to do all those things. So it's been really eye-opening to, come to the table as a true partner, rather than, having more of an agenda, I think, that I had on the agency side.
Yeah, I think also on the other side is you better love meetings.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be in meetings all day long. Also, I never knew that I would be a master at building decks. Yeah. Because you build a lot of decks. But now being on the brand side as well, I think playing off of what Xanthe just said, I almost don't know how you do it on the agency side. I don't know how the conversations that we have in the hallways, the conversations that we have internally are so rich that how that information gets passed on into the agency world, it's tough. It's tough. And I remember being there and asking those same questions, and what are they doing over there? And why don't we have this information? It's really an interesting advantage, I think, that you have on brand side, is that you know everything. You really do. And so when you're kicking projects off and you're diving into them at first, the wealth of knowledge that you're bringing to bear when a project is initiated is probably tenfold. And how to get that transferred into our agencies. We use lots of agencies. Our team is really small. It's not as big as Xanthe's, but so we use a lot of agencies to really get our work done. And that's our biggest challenge, is how do we brain dump what we are breathing, eating, sleeping with every single day? How do we get that into our agencies' minds so that they can help us successfully?
So true. And I think also, I still, when people say, has the client approved it, and they're talking about me, I'm still like, wait, what? I'm not qualified really to be a client. I'm still creative. But what we're saying about agencies, like we have some great agency partners, and that's been something we've really tried to figure out, is what is that dynamic between a creative director on our side and a creative director on agency side? And how do they work like brother and sister, or sister and sister, whatever it is, to create something. And creatives inherently have some ego and some territorialism and some I invented it here first. And so that's been really challenging to navigate, just being perfectly honest. Like, we're still figuring that out. What does it look like when two heavy hitter creative directors are both in an edit bay duking it out over a cut? Like, who do you listen to? Who gets the final say? And so we're sort of making up the rules as we go. I mean, we tend to go, okay, if we can't reach a decision, let's go up and see, present both cuts. But I think that's something that is challenging. And also the creative directors on the agency side will say, why do I only have 15 minutes of this CD's time on the client side? Like, why are they so overscheduled that they can't look at this stuff? So many meetings. Yeah, I never thought I'd be this scheduled. Like, I start working at 8 a.m., I finish at like 6:30, but I don't work weekends, generally speaking. Of course, there's shoots and all sorts of stuff, but to have every minute spoken for, I think that's been a really, really difficult challenge for me, is that there's no empty space. And a lot of the ideas come from empty space, and from maybe you're hungover, maybe you went, talk to someone too long at lunch, maybe you took the afternoon off to look at a museum, and there's really, that space just isn't there, so you kind of have to make it for yourself. And I think actually having the refresher of a weekend where no one's emailing you has been good to get that like vacuum to sort of think about stuff, create.
Actually, a follow-up question on that is, since there are people from the agency side also curious about brand side, like, how do you win your clients over in a way that there's trust to push your vision?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to deeply understanding the product that you're. I remember when I interviewed at Nest, one of the people they wanted me to interview with was Matt Rogers, who's the co-founder of Nest. I'm like, okay, well, how? I don't know what I'm going to talk to this guy about. And then I sat there, he came in, he's all sweaty from his bike ride, and he's excited, and he's like, how do we sell our products better? How do we tell people how great these things are? People aren't understanding it. And then we had this honest conversation about the product itself and messaging at retail, and I'd been through Home Depot and Best Buy, and I was looking at things and taking pictures. I'm like, well, maybe the copy's too long here, or this diagram doesn't explain it, or maybe you guys need a moment. Like, Nest was huge in 2011. What's your moment again? How do you get back in pop culture? It was this amazing pop culture, the first, thermostat, smart thermostat, made headlines, beautifully designed, sort of the new Apple. And I think this, my dad was an engineer, and so I've always had a proclivity for engineers. So I think being surrounded also by that culture and being able to dive in and really learn something and then come back and say, this is where I think we could go. Like, this is, I think, the way that would sell to consumers in a compassionate way. We're not trying to beat them with product points. We're trying to get into their lives in a way that feels human and warm. So I think it comes from product, from really loving what you're working on.
Yeah, for me, it's really, it's about blurring the lines. It's our agency partners that, and I'm even using the word partners, our agencies that we work with, I almost want to consider them as our staff. And the more we blur the lines between my team and their team, it's always successful, or much more successful. I think where we fall down is in knowing that, having been there, the agency scenario where they want to go away, they want to spend 3-4 weeks, and then they want to come back and do big dog and pony. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
The only way it works is if we're sort of in it together. Because we have legitimate creatives on our side just as much as the legitimate creatives on the agency side. And so really getting those folks just to understand that we're better together, that there's this thing is, the team of it all. It's not agency versus internal team, whatever you want to call us. When you really blur those lines, I think that's where you really see magic.
Awesome. So did you hesitate before joining a brand? I'm asking this because also when you go from agency side, you're used to a certain title, a certain salary, and there's rules that differ. And what often happens is, like, if you are like a C-suite or an executive and you go down to director, you're like, you don't dare say, well, that's not going to look cool on my LinkedIn. You do something about it.
Yeah. I actually did think about it quite a bit, and I remember the job that I was going to take before I took Nest, and I ended up turning it down, was to run Dove out of London for Ogilvy, and it was kind of my dream job. I'm like, I'm like woman power. Everybody's like bring them all to the table. I love the brand. It was really the kind of the thing I wanted to do. And I ended up turning it down because I felt like I was going to thread the needle the same exact way again. Maybe on a larger scale, on a better brand, with better colleagues, maybe more global impact. But Ogilvy was amazing, and all the people that I would work with, and Dede, and all these people were so incredible. And I felt like it was the opportunity. But then I just thought, I've got to do something else. I've got to, like, what does creativity mean in a different way? Is there a way to apply what I love to different areas that are going to challenge me, that are going to make me step up? And this is absolutely the hardest job I've ever had, hands down. Like, every single day, some days I come home and I'm like, oh, that was awesome, I fucking nailed it. And most of the time I'm like, geez, I have a lot to learn. Like, I have a lot to study. Management, what does that mean? It's hard to do. What does it really mean for people that take their careers extremely seriously, that are on ladders in a corporation? How do you play together well? How do you do all these things? And so my hesitation was, and then the title thing actually is really interesting, because a lot of people don't understand that. When we approach folks with, you're a senior art director, they're like, but I'm an ECD at this agency. Well, okay, you have 10 years of experience, so client side, that means a senior art director, roughly, right? And I remember when the recruiter called me with Nest, and they said, we're going to offer you a director job, like a creative director. I'm like, I've been a creative director. Is this like, what is that? Okay. And then she said, no, trust me, this is a really big deal. You're a creative director. I'm like, okay. Like I said, I've done that. But I remember I got to Nest, and there was an all hands. It was 2,000 people in the company. And they had 2 pictures up on the screen. This is my first day. It happened to be an all hands. And they had my picture and the director of engineering. And I called my mom after. I'm like, I did get a big job. This is a really big job. I didn't think it was. I guess this is a big deal. So, but I definitely, the title wasn't at all. I mean, I think it was creative director Nest, and that was it. So it was totally different. I'd been an ECD or CCO before, so. Yeah, the leveling is very different, but you get so much more scale and also longevity, I find, on the client side. I never really had leadership training. I was lucky enough to have people like Rob Schwartz, who mentored me, Lee Clow. Like, I got a lot of hands-on mentoring from people that I just sort of attached myself to, and I was like, I just got to learn from you everything, and I'd pester them and get all I could out of them. But, with Google, there's actually built-in courses and classes, and they take you away and they say, these are the things you need to work on, and you get all sorts of feedback and 360s and all this stuff that you don't feel also like you're failing. Like, I did really poorly on some stuff this last cycle, and they're like, we're gonna fix that, and we're gonna fix it together. It doesn't mean, okay, bye, you're gone. It means you're doing great work, you to work on this stuff. And so it doesn't feel as much as like agency, where I felt like any moment I could be shown the door. Yeah. I just didn't have a hit campaign in 6 months, so okay, do I have a number on my back? Yeah. So I do feel.
That's big. That last point. Yeah, especially at Google, you really feel like they're vested in you.
Yeah.
Like, you're here, you're with the company, and the support's ridiculously great. I think for me overall, moving from agency side into the brand world, I panicked. It was like a life-changing moment for me a little bit. Well, not a little bit, literally it was. Born and raised and really lived in Southern California, mostly Los Angeles, my entire life. My first job with eBay, it took me to the East Coast. It took me just outside of Philadelphia. So it was a massive change. My wife at the time was pregnant with our second child. And what was I doing? I had known the entertainment industry and most of the Asian car brands, and all of a sudden I was going to go work for eBay and somehow get tied into the retail world, and it was bizarre. It was really bizarre. And moving, I tell people, like, moving from obviously 72 and sunny all day long to Four Seasons, and I even joked that I had to wear a sports coat a lot when I first got there. It was really weird. It was really weird. Had to buy a whole new outfit, a whole new wardrobe, and just so it was life-changing in that way, but it was also life-changing just in the culture and how things worked. And so I completely fell apart at first. It was really, really tough for me. I I didn't know where I belonged and how I belonged. I remember, I think I told this the story the other day when we were talking, like, I remember my third day, it was snowing, and I peeked out my office window and I noticed that it was kind of coming down, but I noticed it wasn't sticking. This is a very novice West Coaster talking here. And I remember seeing someone around 3 o'clock and they said, oh, you know, make sure you get out before the snow. And fast forward, it's about 5 o'clock, and I walked outside my door. It was 5:05. I walked outside my door to check on my team and say hello, maybe goodbye. There was no one in the office of about 500 people. And so I obviously gathered my things, went outside, and my car was the only car in the entire parking lot. And so I just realized then, like, I just didn't know what I was doing, but, you know, I had really no clue. So I was trying to deal with, like, this transition of obviously work and working in a much larger organization and for a brand, a big brand, to a life-changing moment. And it was tough. It's really, really tough. I think, you know, I grasped onto things that were familiar, of course. I think we all do. I grasped onto what I knew, or at least I thought I knew. But it was tough. And I think, you know, mentors are something we all talk about a lot. But that was the moment for me. I don't think I really had a great mentor until that moment. And I was like, I need someone to help me through this. Like, I'm not going to make it unless I find someone. And I found a few people. And I was really lucky to have a couple people guide me through that, tell me it's all going to be okay, that you're going to be fine, Jason. But it was tough. It was definitely a moment for me, yeah.
Well, that leads to transitioning as a leader as well. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your point of view of leadership. Is it for everyone? Because with the glamorization of leadership, you know, the past 6 years, you know, Lean In and Girlboss and Fast Company cover of Jessica Walsh, you're just like, I want to be a boss too. But what you don't realize is the job also sucks. It's great and it's hard. You know, it's like you work super hard. You were telling me about the second shift, which I'd love you to get into. Yeah. You know, like you're in bed with Keynote and you're not talking to your husband. Like, that's the reality too. Yeah. So yeah, is leadership for everyone, and is it okay to not want to be a leader?
Absolutely, it's okay not to be a leader. I think more often than not, creative people should just let themselves be creative people. And there's always going to be a need for brilliance and great ideas and craftsmanship and just incredible talent. And I wish that looking back, that I hadn't sort of forced myself into, like, that went from art director to ACD, and I remember that was sort of the fork in the road, and where I started managing, and I was like, well, I have friends, like, they like me, like, that'll be fine to manage people. No. It was a real growth experience, and it still is. I consider myself truly like a designer at heart. I would much rather be designing than leading meetings or speaking at all hands or talking or setting team goals or team vision or doing org charts or doing P&L. Like, there's so much that is the business side, and especially in my role now, it's about 70% of that, where I think 30% is driving great work, trying to infuse great work in everything we do, and great thinking. But it's a lot of general management and things that I think the MBAs that I sit alongside got to go to MBA school to learn, and I didn't. I was at art school, and I was building my portfolio and learning from some of the greats in the industry. But I think unless you really love working with other people, and there's no part of you that doesn't mind consensus building and actually collaborating with lots of people, then I don't think brand side is for you. I mean, I think you've got to inherently be a people person. You got to like other human beings and talking to them and hearing from them all day. And if you don't, it's really, really hard. So yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everybody.
No.
It's definitely not for everybody. I think, that fork in the road that you mentioned, when you're a lot of similar sort of scenarios, right? Went to art school. Like, I used to love going to work to design. Just sit at my desk and design. Yeah. And I wouldn't leave. I'd be there 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. I just wanted to design. I loved what I did every single day. And you get to this point with success, it's weird. All of a sudden, you're praised for doing such a wonderful job, and they promote you up the ranks from designer to senior designer to art director to senior art director. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're managing people. And that craft that I held so dear, that you hold so dear, all of a sudden it goes away a little bit. And you get put into a role where it's really a people management role, right? It's the business itself, it's running the business, it's making sure that those ideas are seeing, that need to be seen are seen, and that the vision of what you're trying to accomplish really gets out there. But you really move into a business leader / people person, I think, leader. And yeah, I definitely don't have an MBA either.
Yeah.
I wish maybe I almost did. It could help. But we have a lot of super smart MBAs that we work with that I think help us there. But I think the biggest thing is understanding people. Yeah. And I think that the greatest strength you can have if you want to make that transition, if you want to make the move over, is that you have to really understand people. And you have to really pull yourself back.
You were saying that 75% psychologists.
I said, we were talking about like what my role is. I said, I think it's about 75% psychologist, 20% politician, and 5% creative director.
Yeah.
I think I spend, the vast, and I have a very small team. My last job, I had a team similar to Xanthe's. So, the larger your team, obviously, the more people you have to...
The more psychology
you have to go with. But it's important. I mean, the health of your people is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have a healthy team, I'm not talking about physical health. Yes, of course I am. But mental health, very specifically, and keep them energized and engaged and excited. And, I want them to feel how I felt 20 years ago. Yeah. And when I was really in it, and I just couldn't stop. I just loved it. And so I find myself spending most of my days being a cheerleader at times, being a support, being a shoulder, being just being an ear sometimes, and listening to what they need. And I know that it is my job to keep them well-fed mentally, well-fed physically, well-fed any way. Google does that for us. We're very well-fed at Google.
Very well-fed.
But yeah, I think that, we have to keep people challenged. It's a much, much different job, I think. And I don't think it's anything that I knew going into it, for sure.
Well, we're running out of time. I would love to hear your 2 biggest mistakes.
Oh, God. Find me after at the bar. I'll tell you all about them.
And that will help us better.
2 biggest mistakes.
Or in general.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hiring assholes.
Yeah.
I've learned not to hire assholes.
Even
I don't
if
care.
They're amazing.
Even if they're the most talented people in the world. And sometimes that happens. Like, sometimes you have folks that are they are brilliant. Yeah. They are nothing shy of brilliant. But, you're only as good as your team, and so it's super important, especially, I feel like on agency side, you can get away with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like there's always kind of that agency jerk.
Yeah.
And maybe I've been it at times, I don't know. But inside a brand, inside a team, as I just talked about the health of the team, it's so important not to have that. And hiring in general. Yeah. I've made some mistakes. I think I'm pretty good now.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty good now. I have some wonderful folks on my team in the audience that I love dearly. But hiring is tough.
I think hiring's tough, and also being slow to fire when you find toxicity and not moving on it, because you eventually bring down the team, because they say this is tolerated and you're letting this happen, and we all know this person's bad, and you let it fester, and you on the flip side, you have this high hope that there's going to be a massive change, and I've seen that too, which always makes me pull back sometimes from jumping the gun. And I do consider everything, but especially, letting toxicity fester is a big one. I would say.
Great. Well, we have 10 minutes left, 9 minutes for questions, so feel free to ask anything. I have a...
My question is about culture and how you adjust to the client side culture from that cool agency life culture where there's a keg in the kitchen and there's happy hour on Monday nights? Like, how do you go from that to everybody's wearing slacks and dress shoes?
Well, fortunately at Google, it's not all slacks, luckily.
Yeah.
But I do have more slacks now, as you can see.
Yeah.
No, I can't find a beer to save my life in half of our buildings. I've tried. And now I have the key to the sales cabinet so I can get a beer after work. But I think the culture thing is really, really hard because you're not one big clique fighting a common enemy, which is usually the client. You are the client, and that's even more scary. But I think, bringing people together. Also, my team is across 7 offices. Yeah. So it's like I can't have a happy hour because then I'm excluding like 6 offices. And do I have a happy hour because I have kids and I have to rush home to get the kids? And so it's just really, that's hard. And also, people are much more buttoned up. Like, I swear a lot, I say things that are inappropriate. Sorry, Michael. But sometimes, I catch myself because I'm used to, I was, 15 years agency side. So I was of a certain, group, and we were raw and honest and real. And that's taken some adjustment. Like, I thought I was buttoned up for agency side, but I'm like unbuttoned for client side, I think.
Culture's tough. It definitely is tough. I think, this is for sure probably the most dressed up my team has ever seen me at Google, for sure. Google specifically is really relaxed. It does have a really incredible culture, I think, in general. We were speaking earlier, I was saying that I don't even think of Google as a company. I think of it as a movement. And there's sort of this power in the people, in Google. And so it's a different culture. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. I think it has its pros and its cons. Our specific team, more on the micro side, our team is super, super close. They work really well together. I think there are some really great friendships that are there. Yes, it's not keg stands at 5 o'clock and those sorts of things, although we do have a bar cart now. Oh, no, we don't. We don't. But we try to keep it as light as fun. And, there's also another thing about, that we didn't really talk about, but offsites.
Oh, yeah, so many offsites.
Offsites. So on the brand side, there's this thing called an offsite, if you're not that familiar with it, which some weird reason at Google and at most brands, you do very often. It seems like we're always at offsites.
Always.
And sometimes,
next week.
Yep. I think sometimes those culture moments, those moments I think that happen more serendipitously inside your agencies, they happen more at some of these offsites.
Yeah.
Not those, they're work offsites, let's be clear.
But you're still itching in the offsites to go make something or look at a cut, or I'm running out to go call an agency, or it's really hard to sit through so much business when you're like, I'm a good maker, I want to go make things. Like, I'll be more valuable to you guys if I can get out of this meeting and go make something. So that's always a balance, but then
they have to have you in the meeting.
Yeah, they have to have me in the meeting because my team is huge and it has a big impact on the org and the whole overall health of marketing, right? So there's that. But and then I also, as soon as I want to duck out, I learn something, or I learn a little like snippet of a product information, or why sales are tanking somewhere, and I go, okay, how can I go and action on that and actually like rev up my team to make something that's going to solve a problem in total real time? Like, I love, love, love. My favorite part about Google is the access to the heads of marketing. So my boss runs all of hardware, is a woman, Adrienne Hayes. She's amazing. And I'm on ping with her, concepting how to do a promo for our, Christmas over ping. We're talking about, we could put that in and Santa could come in and say this, and we're just making stuff. And it would have taken 2 weeks and many phone calls and dead silence and no money, and then we're just gonna go in production and make something. And so it's just, I love the immediacy of it. Yeah.
Cool. Let's get a couple of other questions.
Sure.
Right, you.
Thanks for being honest about the dynamic between client and agency. I often think about that a lot, and is that common enemy or being across the table, is that a fact of our respective industries, or what can we do to bridge the gap?
I think we have to be more honest with one another. I think we're at this place right now where we all see the writing on the wall in some ways, that there's a big change happening. But one of the things that I've talked to some folks at Google about is, they'll say, we'll get off the phone, they'll say, oh, I didn't like that or whatever. I'm like, why didn't you tell them when they were on the phone? It's okay. They want to hear it. They want to hear the bad news so they can change it. And so we're pushing each other, and agencies are going, hey, that kind of sucked when you brought this creative director in that killed all our ideas and you didn't even see them. And so we're figuring it out, but we have to have those honest conversations constantly. And also be more real about our needs. And I remember calling Rhea, who's a CMO at 72, and we're old friends, so I said, girl, like, I need more from you guys than just TV spots. Like, I'm in a retail business. Like, we're selling hardware at 100,000 doors. Like, I need you guys to help me on that stuff, because it's a beast and it's 80% of what we're doing. So I need help there instead of help on the the top of the pyramid, on the top of the Christmas tree. Like, I need someone to put the trunk in the stand, because it's not sexy, but I need it done. So I think we need to be more honest. How about you?
Yeah, I think transparency, honestly, I think that's square in the middle of it. I think really, we have to realize that there has been a big shift, and there will obviously continue to be some sort of a shift. When I was at eBay, we were an internal team. We were the 10th, 11th largest agency in the United States. Like, we were an internal team at eBay, but we were on ad ages. Like, that's weird, right? So, like, I think both sides. I think that the agencies that we work with that don't succeed are the ones that don't realize that there are people on the other side of the fence that are just as smart, just as creative, and just as powerful at what you're trying to accomplish together. And I think you have to come through, and with that transparency, we're all trying to solve the same goal.
Right.
It's real simple, right? Like, I want to put out the most amazing ad ever.
Yeah.
I know you do too. And so a lot of times there's just, I think that a little bit, is there some history there where agencies used to go away. You go away and you think and you do amazing things. And those are fun moments to be in. And you come and you do the dog and pony. Yeah. And the dog and pony is supposed to wow the client. You're supposed to just say yes. Yeah. But that is old. I think that's yesterday. I think tomorrow is, you're in it together. You're in it with them every single day. And picking up the phone and talking to the chief creative officer, talking to the group creative, whoever, the group creative director, whoever that is that you're working with on the other side, and being able to have a normal human conversation with them is really, really important. I do that all the time. I make sure that, unfortunately, sometimes it's on a Saturday and I'm at my kid's soccer game or something, but sometimes I just need to sync with that person for a minute. And it's work, but it's not work. Yeah. And when we blur the line between those two, I think you see great things.
Yeah. I think we have time for one last question, or? What time is it? 2:40. Sure. Okay.
Hi, I really enjoyed the presentation. I wanted to know, you talked a little bit about how hiring is incredibly important, not hiring assholes and getting rid of people when they're toxic or it's just not working. I would love it if you would talk a little bit about what you are looking for, maybe a top 3 attributes that you think would be beneficial when you're bringing someone onto your team. And if I get to have a part B, does it differ what you're looking for maybe when you're on agency side versus client side? Thank you.
Yeah. I'm looking for someone that gets along with people, that likes people. I mean, I kind of keep hammering that, but that's really important to me. Someone that genuinely walks into a room and invites people in and doesn't have a dark rain cloud. Like, that's super important. I think a maker, creative directors and creatives that just get in and start futzing with stuff and making things and taking some of our budget and go cut a rip or go do something or push on something, like, that works really, really well. I mean, there's a lot of heavy lifting creative that has to be done, but I think more and more I'm looking for people that just can take a ball and run with it. Yeah. Like, I think my team is pretty senior in general, and we were talking about it a little bit at lunch. Like, 10 years of experience is almost like the minimum as far as like who I'm working with, and just being realistic. And this is my team only though, so it's it's different on Creative Lab and Brand Studio and you guys, but those are 2 things. But I'm sure.
Yeah, I think a great book
Yeah.
is
Still a great book.
Still a great book. Got to have a great book. I want to be wowed by your work. But I think also can someone work in this collaborative environment? Were they a solo artist before? Now, we could be hiring for a solo artist.
Right.
I mean, those definitely exist. As we mentioned before, we have those folks who are individual contributors, and sometimes we do look for those folks. It's not often as much, and so we're looking for, I think, those big-time collaborators. But also, I think the biggest thing for me is someone can go run without me.
Yeah.
I'm looking for someone who they can take maybe a little spark or initiative by themselves. There's nothing I love more when my team comes to me with stuff that I didn't ask for.
Yeah.
That is like the best day ever.
best.
I can hang it up and go
Yeah.
home. Like, I just love it. And it doesn't have to be always perfect. I think that's the thing between agency and brand too, is that you panic a little bit sometimes inside the agency world where like, oh my God, if it's not the best thing ever, I'm gonna get fired, I'm gonna walk out the door, whatever. I always try to tell my team, and I want people to understand, like, it's okay. Like, show me the bad ideas with the great ideas. Show it all to me. But I love it when people bring stuff to me.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we're out. Thank you very much for listening, and let's give a round of applause for Xanthe and Jason.
And Mara. Thank you, Mara.
Thank you, Mara.